Right, I'd like to welcome you all to my Lightroom session. Firstly, I would just like to just go through the functionality of Lightroom first, just to give people a little bit of background, just in case you're not familiar with Lightroom. So Lightroom is very similar in lots of ways to, it's an Adobe product, so it's very similar to Camera Raw in Photoshop, with a few extra bits and pieces thrown in for processing. I am using the subscription edition here, so I have Lightroom and Photoshop on subscription at 10 or 11 euro a month. I think it's very good value personally myself, because if you're using if you're processing quite a bit and using it on a daily basis, you really do get value for your money, and you will always have the latest version of the software at your disposal as well. So without further ado, if you look at the top panel here, it says Library, Develop. So Library is where you keep, it's your library system. Develop is where you do all your developing. Map is for geotagging your images, and it will bring up a map base and show you exactly where each one was taken and give you the coordinates if you have your geotagging on in your camera. Book is a piece of software that will help you build books and booklets. You can send them off to printers to have them printed. If you have a project you want to just produce in book form, slideshow, you can actually produce running slideshows here and import music into it and have the slides fading in and out and all that. Print is for printing, and web is for producing low-res images that you want uploaded to various social media platforms. Down on the right hand side here, you have your directories. Just above it here you have the navigator. So if I zoom into this image here, let me zoom in 1:1, so you can see this rectangle here, and if you just move that around, it brings you to various parts if you want to zoom into something. So that's zoomed in 1:1, which is 100 really. So we'll fit it back out again to there, and you can have set up your own ratios or whatever you want to work. I find I use the fit and I use the 1:1 would be the two ratios I use quite a bit. So these are my directories here that I set up myself, and all my work is within those directories. If we come down here to landscape, so this is my landscape folder, and within landscape you have all the variations within that. If you come down to the Galties, press on the Galties, there it is. If you go into any one here, so these were all into 2013, these are the ones that I would have used, so on down along the list. So they're all the different days basically that I was out. Anywhere where you have an arrow like this, there's more files within that again. So Lightroom takes care of all that for you. So if I went to the Galties today and I came back with my card, all I'd have to do is put my card into my computer, go to import the images from the card, direct it to put the files into Galties here, and I don't have to do any more. Just press import then, and it will set up a directory then down here under 2020 with today's date on it. So it's very, very handy, very fast and very convenient way of looking after all your images. So if you're using Lightroom, and if you're not importing your files directly into Lightroom, I would advise you to start doing it, because it is the easiest way of looking after all your files, and you don't have to be thinking, where did I put such and such It looks after everything for you all the time. So this was that's the way I organize my files, essentially. Very, very easy way, as I say, to look after them. So that's the left hand side of the panel. On the right hand side, the panel over here, you have the histogram up the top here. So this is your exposure from your camera. Underneath, then you have the information on your ISO, your lens, your f-stop, and your time. So if you just pull that down, you have all the information here, all the metadata here about the file, about your camera, your lens. All that information is retained here all the time. So to work on something, then you go into your develop module, and you'll see here that Lightroom works on a very logical basis. Once you do a few things first, which is when you bring in a file, the first thing you will always do is come down to lens corrections, click on remove chromatic aberrations, and enable the profile corrections. So that will correct any problems that the lens creates. So it will pick up whatever camera you're using and whatever lens is on the camera. You can see here the lens profile is built in here because since I started using the Olympus camera and Olympus gear, it's a built-in correction. I don't have to go down to that panel at all myself anymore. But if I brought in somebody else's file, I would have to go down and do that. So up the top here, you'll see you have cropping facilities. We won't dwell on these now at the moment, but you have spot removal, red eye correction, you have a graduated filter, you have a radial filter, and you have a brush. You have various applications within that. If we go down to the basic panel here, just to the basic panel, so just working it down, you have your white balance and color temperatures, exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites and blacks. You have your textures, clarity, dehaze, vibrance, saturation. You have your tone curve here that you can use. You can do it pulling and pushing these if you wish. You have your HLS sliders or your color sliders. You have split toning underneath that. You have sharpening underneath that. You have noise reduction below that, the lens corrections then. And you have the transformation tools down here, which I use extensively if I'm doing architectural work. Very, very effective. But you have to keep in mind when you're shooting the image, an architectural image, you have to have a lot of space around because this will be cropping some of the image. As it corrects a vertical, it will be cropping an image. So you've got to be aware of that. And then down at the very last here, you have you can put on a vignette around the edge of the photograph, and below that you can add grain if you wish to add grain. Calibrations, we won't go into that. So that's the basic panels within Lightroom. Down here on this panel, then just below the image, you have the full view here. I use this one quite a bit actually, which shows the before and after. So as you can see, I don't think I've actually done anything to this image, but if I have done a little bit of work to this, let's pull and push a few little bits and pieces here, bring the blacks out, and we'll say bring the whites out like that. So put in a bit of contrast into it. So you can see now the one on the right hand side has changed substantially, and the one on the left hand side has stayed the same. Within Lightroom, then over on this side, so I'll just go back to the main view here again. Lightroom is a non-destructive process, by the way, so all of these changes that I made to that, you can backtrack to any one of them, or you can go back to when you imported the file, remove chromatic aberrations and the lens profile. So I'm going to go back to here. So that's essentially the file that came out of the camera, basically, with the lens profile adjustment on it. So that's the file before you started doing any work on it. So at any stage, whether it's even tomorrow or 5 years time, you can come back to that stage of the file at any given time. So I'll explain later how LightRoom actually works, how it organizes the information for files and things like that. But look, we might just leave it at that for the moment. That's just a very quick introduction to LightRoom, and we'll continue just in a moment with processing an image. So we'll just leave it there and we'll be right back.